Bangalore and Niti step in when you were in hospital, you were having your bypass, you said all
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A very, very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for coming in such large numbers. This is the valedictory session for the series that we have been having over the past year under the rubric of Metamorphoses. Metamorphoses has been a very productive collaboration, I would say, amongst Niti Aayog, the Center for Policy Research, and India International Center. And the motivation behind launching the series was that we are living in a world, we are living in an age where the gap perhaps between technological advancement that is taking place so rapidly and human understanding of that technology, there is a bigger and bigger gap which is growing. We all use the new technologies, all the digital technologies, our smartphones, the internet, but not many of us are really aware of the technology that drives that change. And much more importantly, what we have found is that there is a big impact of these technologies on our society, on individual interaction, on our politics, as you have seen, various controversies about how digital technologies have been used to influence elections, the role of social media, what influence that has been having. So there has been a whole series of interactions that we have had over the last year, which has been looking at various dimensions of the advancement of technology and how it is impacting on us. By the way, it is not just the dark side of this technology, but we have also been looking at what are the huge amount of benefits that have also come to us because of these technologies. And particularly for countries like India, these technologies offer the opportunity to leapfrog into the future. So while we have had all these different interactions, today we have a very special guest with us, Professor Paulraj from Stanford University. He's the inventor and a pioneer of what is known as MIMO, or multiple input, multiple output wireless technology. Which is the key to all modern wireless networks. And he has authored more than 400 research publications, number of textbooks, and has been a co-inventor for almost 80 US patents. So he is very much, right at the center of this technological change that is taking place. He founded 3 technology companies in the US, which were later acquired by Intel, Broadcom, and Hewlett-Packard Enterprises. And his major recognitions include the Friendship Award from the government of the People's Republic of China, the US Government National Inventors Hall of Fame, the Marconi Prize, and the IEEE Sciences in the US, China, and Sweden. He has served in the Indian Navy for 25 years, where he developed the anti-sonar technology and later founded 3 labs, CDAC, DEITI, and CAIR, the DRDO, and CRL. His recognitions in India include the Padma Bhushan, the 3rd highest civilian award awarded by the government of India. So as you can see, he has a very, very remarkable and very impressive biodata in terms of his scientific accomplishments. And what I did was to invite Professor Paulraj to help us look at the future. That is, we are all aware now of what this technology is all about, the manner in which it is advancing, but also to look at where is it taking us. Not only in terms of the technology, but I hope Professor Paulraj will also look at what is likely to be the impact. And because of his familiarity with India and familiarity with where India is in this whole game, he will also perhaps look at where India is located in this space and what India needs to do in order to make maximum use of the technologies that are available. So I have great pleasure in welcoming Professor Paulraj to this evening. Before I turn over the mic to our other guests here, let me just say that it has been a great privilege for us, both at the IIC and the CPR, to work together with Niti Aayog. And I must particularly thank Mr. Amitabh Kant, the CEO of Niti Aayog, who very, very readily and willingly decided to support us in this particular venture. And I hope, Amitabh, that you will not be disappointed, therefore, with what we have been able to come up with during the last 1 year. And my thanks also go to CPR. I also happen to be associated with CPR, so it is a particular pleasure for me to welcome Yamini Iyer, President of the Center for Policy Research, and who's my boss at the center. And she has very, very much been a very staunch supporter of this particular series, and we are already looking at what other things we can do together in the future. Because this is the last session that we are having, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to really just express our thanks to all those who made this series possible. So from Niti Aayog itself, of course, I have already mentioned Amitabh, but we have had also very much, very big support from Anna Roy, from Alek Sharan, from Puneet Shukla and KV Lakshay. So thank you, all of you, the team from Niti Aayog. And from CPR, of course, we have Yamini, but I would like to pay special tribute to Richa Bansal. In fact, the designing of this particular series was very much inspired by her. So a particular thanks go to her. And in CPR, we also have Dhruv Arora, Dhruv Bhasin, Priyanka Shah and Shrishti Bhatt, who were also part of the CPR team who assisted in this particular series. Others who helped us design, for example, the logo and also design some of our publicity material, we have Apar Gupta and Orun Das. And finally, from our own India International Center, let me thank, first of all, someone who is absent this evening, Mr. N.N. Vohra, who is the president of the India International Center. He was very, very enthusiastic about chairing this particular session because it happens to be the valedictory session. He has been someone who has been very enthusiastic supporter of this series. So we miss his presence and I am of course going to chair the session in his absence. I would also like to thank Mr. K.N. Srivastav, who's director of the India International Center, and Mr. Kamal Wali, the secretary, Rohit Khera, who is the chief financial officer, and from the program division, which I chair the program advisory committee in the IIC, and I would like to particularly thank my own team at the IIC, Premila Ghosh, Tete, and Portia Conrad. All of them worked very, very closely together with us to make this series a success. So thanks to all of you. And now I have a great pleasure in inviting Amitabh to please say a few words on the occasion, and then I will turn to Yamini.
I've just come to listen to Dr. Paulraj. Like, nobody's come to listen to me, so I look forward to listening to him. No, I don't. It's been very fascinating doing this partnership with India International Center and with you in particular and with Yamini. Thank you.
Okay, that was short and sweet. You don't need to follow this bad example. So, Yamini, you have the floor. Would you like to speak from here or whichever way, whatever is comfortable for you? Yeah, sit down.
Okay, there. I'm being instructed. it's wonderful to be the boss of a team that bosses you. I was instructed to speak from here, so I shall follow like a dutiful boss. But on behalf of CPR, I would really like to extend a heartfelt thanks for giving us this privilege to the Niti Aayog, to Mr. Amitabh Kant, to the IIC, and especially to Ambassador Shyam Saran, who conceived of this idea, spearheaded it, and saw it through. Whenever a group of researchers is confronted with a complex public policy problem, the one thing they like to do is to scratch their heads and say, well, let's organize a set of seminars. We have at CPR, over the last few years, been scratching our heads trying to understand what this big animal of technology that has thundered into our everyday lives, but also very much into the lives of the work that we do, into the life of the space of public policy. We have been trying to understand it. We have been trying to make sense of its impact, of its potential, of its dark side. And so we thought the best way to go about this is to start having a set of conversations. And it was really fortuitous that Ambassador Shyam Saran and us had this conversation, and along with Niti Aayog and the IIC, we were given the opportunity to facilitate a series of dialogues. And over the course of this last year, we have explored a wide range of issues. In the first lecture, the inaugural lecture that Professor Yochai Benkler gave, he described technology as this fast-moving train with three kinds of passengers on it. One are those who are the driving force, who really quite know where they're going, what to do, how to get onto the train and make sure they get to their destination as quickly as possible. The others who are sort of vaguely sitting in for the ride, who more or less know where they're going but may get confused between station A and station B, but are pretty comfortable. And then those that are barely hanging on. And the purpose of this series was really to bring the drivers, those who somewhat know what they're doing, and those who are barely hanging on together into a conversation to try and frame how to understand this animal of technology, how to build a set of norms around this, and how to build a collective conversation so that we can work through its complexities. We've tried to do this through the course of these dialogues. We've looked at the relationship between technology and the state, try to unpack the social contract, understand how technology as it's come into public policy is influencing its relationship with us as citizens. We've tried to understand how technology is trying to shape the market. We've tried, particularly in this context of technology 4.0, what happens when artificial intelligence takes over and all of us find ourselves with no jobs. Mercifully, by virtue of having a conference, we ensured that as researchers, we will always have a job, no matter how much artificial intelligence tries to take over, because after all, someone has to organize the seminars. But beyond that, there are big questions that we sought to understand better through this series. We also looked at this big question of regulation and building a legal regime around technology that supports and harnesses the potential of technology, but at the same time protects individuals' rights, citizens' rights, particularly around some of the big debates that India is having on questions of data privacy, data localization, and so forth. So this has truly been a very wide-ranging conversation. I don't think that there has been a space where such a diverse range of issues around technology have come together in a conversation. Each of these has been Facebook Lived and videoed so that there is a longer legacy to this. And from CPR's very selfish perspective, what this did do, in the end, every good seminar gives you a set of very good research questions. And we are now in the process of building a new research portfolio around technology and society, which will touch on many of the themes that we've debated over the course of this last year. And we hope to be able to dive deeper into many of these questions as we build our work in the field of technology and society. So thank you very much to all of you who've been such active participants in this. Thank you to the IIC for giving us the opportunity. Thank you to the Niti Aayog for partnering with us and giving us this opportunity. And especially to all of the dynamic colleagues who work together to put this together. I know how difficult it is to organize a single seminar. To do 9 of them in the course of 1 year can in fact really give you a lot of gray hair very fast. But everyone who's participated in in this has done this cheerfully and with great excitement and enthusiasm. And we truly have learned a lot from this effort. Thank you, and look forward to more of these.
It is now my pleasure to invite Professor Paulraj to make his presentation. Since he will also be showing some slides, I would request our other guests on the dais to please sit down in the front row down. And once this is over, then we'll come back. And please put your mobiles on silent, please.
Can I get a little bit of light here? Is there any light here? Any podium light? Okay. No, okay, fine. Switch it off. That's fine. I'll manage. Any podium light? No. And can I advance with this? Can I advance with this? I'll use that. Okay, good. Okay, you can switch off the other lights, yeah.
Yes, it's working now.
Okay, good. You want to switch off that light or keep this on? Mr. Shyam Sharan, Life Trustee, India International Center. Ms. Amitabh Kant, CEO, Niti Aayog. Srimati Yamini Iyer, President, Center for Policy Research. Mr. K. N. Srivastava, Director, Indian International Center. Very distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Can everybody hear me in the back? Okay. My grateful thanks to Shri Shyam Sharan for his kind words. It is a huge privilege to stand before you this evening, and I thank Mr. Sharan for entrusting me to deliver this valedictory lecture in the Metamorphoses series. The previous speakers are all distinguished thinkers and speakers, and I hope I can live up to their high standards. The subject of my remarks this evening is information technology, its recent history, its likely evolution, and its growing societal impact. I will end with my thoughts on India's opportunities as an innovator and builder of information technology. I worked in the Indian Navy for 25 years and then moved to Stanford University in 1991. And since then, apart from my university duties, have worked mainly in the United States and the Chinese wireless technology ecosystems. In India, I've remained in touch with my friends at the IITs. My goal today is to share with you some insights that I have gained over the years, which I hope you will find of some use. Also, I want to thank all of you for your presence this evening. I must first confess that the 25 years in my talk title is false advertising. In the next 25 months would have been more honest, so my apologies. Information technology is best defined by what it enables. Uber ride hailing service, interacting on social media, or using online speech recognition, to name just a few. IT has advanced enormously in recent years, and applications we take for granted today would have been unimaginable 20 years ago. So information technology now touches almost every human being. Cell phones have reached 99% global penetration, and 65% have internet access. IT is also a true democratizer. Whether you are in a penthouse in New York City or in a remote village in Congo, we all use pretty much the same technology. So information technology now has two new powerful frontiers: 5G wireless and artificial intelligence. Both promise amazing new opportunities, so more on this soon. So let me begin by describing the information technology ecosystem. The IT industry can be organized in three-tiered stack. The top layer, which is in red, have companies that deliver applications that we all use. Ola ride hailing, or Paytm transaction, or an Amazon purchase. The next layer of companies are service providers or operators like Jio and Airtel for wireless, Tata Teleservices for internet infrastructure, and Amazon AWS for computing infrastructure, also called data centers. Finally, the core IT, which is the green layer below, or sometimes called core ICT layer, with companies that build hardware, software systems, which makes everything else happen. Some examples are Intel for compute servers, Cisco for internet routers, and Huawei for wireless phones. The global market for the core ICT, which is the bottom layer, is about $1.6 trillion US dollars. So to dig deeper into core ICT, or core IT, I've shown three tiers. At the top are systems or devices that service providers like Jio or we consumers may buy, from routers to server farms, from phones to laptops. The annual value addition by this tier is about $1.1 trillion US. China, United States, South Korea, and Taiwan dominate this tier. The next tier is semiconductor chips, some for data processing and others for wireless transmission, or yet others for machine learning. I've shown the pictures of few chips, 4G wireless chips from Bhushan, a company I founded 2 decades ago. It was then merged with Broadcom. Processor chips from Intel, and deep learning chips from NVIDIA. The annual market size in this layer is about 500 billion US dollars. US, South Korea, China, and Japan, and Singapore are the dominant players. And finally, at the bottom, the IP layer with algorithms, architectures, and design automation that define what these chips do. This needs a sophisticated skills base and lots of PhDs who make up about 15 to 25% of the engineering headcount. I think in one of my companies I had almost 40% PhDs. The biggest barrier to entry into chip design is finding the necessary advanced skills. The United States, with top engineering schools like MIT and Stanford, dominate this tier, but China is running hard to catch up. And finally, here is a delivery view of information technology in 3 layers. The end devices at the top, the internet fabric in the middle, and the servers that run the applications at the bottom. These servers tend to be housed in centralized facilities called data centers and can be large, often 100,000 square feet in area, and use up to 3 to 5 megawatts of power. The internet fabric that connects the servers at the bottom to the end devices at the top, it utilizes optical and wireless transmission and routers to make the data move around. Long-haul links use terrestrial and undersea optical fiber, and medium haul may use millimetric wave radio, and the final access now is almost all wireless. And finally, at the top are endpoints where applications are delivered to the user from smartphones to Amazon Alexa, or soon to come autonomous cars. So let me turn now to some key technologies that underpin IT today and outline the recent history and likely future evolution. Let us begin with semiconductor chips. These are, as I mentioned earlier, range from microprocessors to wireless modems and neural networks. But the most pervasive are microprocessors. This chart plots a number of gates in the Intel processors from 1972 onwards. the trend line largely follows the well-known Moore's law, which predicts that the gate count doubles every 18 to 20 months. Despite many doomsayers, the industry has maintained this exponential growth for the past 45 years. It's simply amazing. Since the first microprocessor, the Intel 4004, the number of transistors per chip has gone up by over 10 million times. And the latest Intel processors have over 20 billion transistors. The new breed of AI chips are even denser. A company called Samba Nova, which I have some connections with, is taping out chips with 120 billion transistors. The density advances in chips initially came from something called Dennard scaling, where as the transistor density doubled, the power per transistor fell in proportion. And Dennard scaling has slowed in recent years, but we have found other means, other approaches to keep the Moore's law intact. So now for some pioneers in microprocessors, I show here three of them, who I know all of them well. Federico Fagin, on the left, he built a circuitry for the first Intel 4004 processor in 1972. And I think I actually used it maybe around 1974. And Ted Half, actually a Stanford PhD, on the right, was the 4004's architect. It's the formation or the design of that chip is a pretty interesting story, so some of you should read it up. But they both started an incredible revolution. In the center is Gordon Moore, Intel's co-founder and former CEO. His observations on transistor density trends became known as the Moore's law. So next is the wireless, and the next key enabler of IT is wireless technology, and the growth of mass market mobile wireless started in the United States in the early 1980s, and almost 2 decades later in India. The plot on the right shows shows smartphone growth, and we now have well over 5 billion smartphones globally, with happily 10% of those in India. The data rate for wireless phones are grown from kilobits per second to gigabits per second today. The big breakthrough in wireless speeds came from introduction of MIMO technology in the mid-2000s, as seen on the left, where once MIMO came, the speeds jumped up a lot. Peak speed now is 700 megabits for LTE advanced and 2 gigabits for Wi-Fi. Wireless is perhaps the most transformative technology in the last half century, and its value for India is hard to underestimate. So now about some pioneers in wireless. Again, many pioneers, but I'll mention 3. On the left is Amos Joel of AT&T, who pioneered the development of the cellular technology in the 1960s. At that time, the challenges of handling intercell interference and cell-to-cell handoff was quite formidable, and he actually managed the engineering challenge to make it happen. Another pioneer is Martin Cooper, known as the father of the cell phone. He did his work at Motorola in the 1970s. Till his breakthrough, mobile phones, or better known as car phones, were so large that they had to be installed in the dicky of the automobile. Cooper's handheld phones started the real mobile revolution. In 1992, soon after I arrived at Stanford, Cooper and I started a company called Raycom, along with the Stanford graduate student Richard Roy. The third name should be familiar. I was lucky to invent MIMO technology, which has turned out to be a fundamental breakthrough in wireless networks. When I first proposed MIMO in 1992, and there are a lot of stories about this on the web, videos, it was first met with wide skepticism. But that changed after a few years, thanks to researchers at Bell Labs, who actually had better mathematical skills than me and put MIMO on a strong theoretical footing. Every time you use your 4G, LTE, or your Wi-Fi on your smartphone, you're using MIMO. More than 5.6 billion people around the world use MIMO, and it is also the key technology for 5G wireless that's yet to come. MIMO has attracted thousands of researchers. There are over 2,000 PhD theses in MIMO, many of them in China, and more than 30,000 research papers and patents. So now a little bit about wireless evolution. This slide shows the history of 2, 3, and 4G cellular. So far, the delivery endpoint for these generations has been the mobile phone. With increasing functionality at every generation, 4G with high-speed internet connectivity, thanks to MIMO, has opened up vast new applications. With 5G, the next generation, the endpoints will expand beyond cell phones to sensors, actuators, vehicles, machinery, and so on. These applications require special service requirements that will be supported by this new technology. With 5G, we will enter a new era of wireless connectivity. Srimati Sundararajan, Secretary DOT, in the audience here today, is driving initiatives to help India both deploy and develop 5G technology. And so there was a report made by the Department of Telecom, and I would probably quote from the preamble. 5G technology has the potential for ushering in a major societal transformation in India by enabling a rapid expansion of the role of information technology across manufacturing, educational, healthcare, agricultural, financial, and social sectors. India must embrace this opportunity by deploying 5G networks efficiently, efficiently, and pervasively, as well as emerge as a significant innovator and a technology supplier at the global level. Emphasis should be placed on 5G touching the lives of rural and weaker economic segments to make it a truly inclusive technology, end quote. So 5G has three pivotal technologies. The first is called enhanced broadband, which will take outdoor data rates to 2 gigabits per second and indoors to 20 gigabits per second. And so it will enable many new services, including virtual reality. The next is technology is massive connectivity that will bring hundreds of billions of IoT devices to the internet, unleashing a host of new applications. Today, we probably have 500 million internet connections through phones, but that will expand, I think, in 20 years to 100 billion connections through IoT in India. And finally, ultra-low latency and high reliability links that will enable remote operation of machinery, drone control, and improve safety of vehicles, and so on and so forth. Much of 5G's potential, like that of AI, is a few years away. 5G can add about $1 trillion of US dollars to Indian economy over the next 15 years. But a lot of hard work lies ahead. The next big enabler of information technology has been the internet. This allows data to flow seamlessly over networks that are diverse in speed, protocols, and medium of transmission. The internet has reached 5 billion users worldwide, and as seen on the plot at the right, and on the left graphic shows country-wise internet penetration. India is not at the very top, but we are in the 60% plus band, which is remarkable growth compared to just 3 years ago. So I think the smartphones in India have done miracles. So now about some pioneers. The origins of internet came from DARPA. DARPA's interest in packet switch networks for air defense in the United States. It was Len Kleinrock on the left who demonstrated a first packet network between UCLA in Los Angeles and Stanford University in 1972. But the power of networking greatly improved once we could interconnect diverse networks. That technology came in 1978 from Vint Cerf, there in the middle, a young Stanford professor then, and Bob Kahn, and on the right. Their TCP/IP protocol now power all of internet. And so me and Vint work quite a lot, and I think almost every day there's some email exchange going on with him. We work together on US government committees. The next enabler of information technology is AI. And what is And what is AI? The AI, by the way, is a technology that's been slow in coming, but now seems to be in high gear. AI is the ability of machines, typically computer systems, to do certain human intelligent tasks like learning, reasoning, or perception. AI may grow beyond this definition. It may one day exceed human intelligence, incorporate networking and storage capabilities not available to humans, and to other forms of intelligence that we do not comprehend today. AI has gone through many false starts. The graph sort of shows its ups and downs. In the 1970s, it was all about knowledge representation and symbolic systems. That proved to be a difficult task. I started the Center for Artificial Intelligence Robotics for the DRDO in 1987. The big opportunity then seemed to be expert systems. But this proved to be also a flop. Neural networks have been known for many, many years, never delivered useful performance for decades. The big breakthrough came in 2010 with a new twist called deep neural networks that's fueling current optimism. There are many pioneers in AI, and let me pick a few. John McCarthy, at Stanford professor, invented the term AI and worked a lot on symbolic systems. He's now no more. Raj Reddy at Carnegie Mellon, who did early work on speech recognition. And AI's fortune really changed in recent years by Jeff Hinton, a researcher who worked all over in England, in the US and Canada, but this time he was in Toronto. He's on the right, who demonstrated amazing success with deep neural networks. This is around 2010. So what are deep neural networks, or also known as deep learning? These are just neural nets. While successful in simple adaptive signal processing, for example, when I built the sonar for the Indian Navy in 1970s in India, we used neural nets too, but they were very, very simple for adaptive filtering. But they did very poorly on AI applications like speech or image recognition. The breakthrough came from use of multiple hidden layers, sometimes hundreds, and that's why we call it deep, and incorporating a vast amount of labeled data to train the network. Training is very costly computationally, and deep learning is only now possible thanks to advances in computing and networking. To illustrate deep neural networks, or DNNs, assume we wish to classify an image as a dog or a cat or a raccoon, and the network is first trained with thousands of labeled images of dogs, cats, and raccoons. Once trained, the network can then identify, it goes into production mode, can identify the image with 95% accuracy when it's presented with an image of one of these three animals. And deep learning is rapidly spreading to hundreds of applications with remarkable and surprising success, almost frightening success. So I will give some examples soon. So we can classify the deep learning applications in 4 layers. The first are consumer and business applications. Many of these are already in widespread use, with many more to come. The next layer are perception applications, and these are now entering wider use. The next layer is autonomy for vehicles and robots. This is entering service in a limited forms, but full autonomy is still 15 years ago, or 15 years away, I think. And finally, there are new applications that might be enabled by the next wave of AI, sometimes called artificial general intelligence. This may be 25 years or even more away. We have very little understanding of what that will look like. So let me show some applications for consumer and business applications. So, for example, real-time translation of street signs. The smartphone pointed at a street sign. It identifies the foreign language that you don't understand, translates that sign to a desired language that you want, and this substitutes on the screen of your phone. Another capability I've seen in China is seamless interaction with shopping assistants. I know no Chinese, and the Chinese clerks know no English. but we're able to communicate with amazing ease with that. You can see a picture there. Some as simple as such translation may seem, this requires enormous technology hidden behind the covers. Examples of business applications are credit card fraud and loan approvals. Deep learning has saved the banks billions of dollars by outperforming humans at these tasks. And moreover, these deep neural networks are getting better every day as they learn from more and more data. And of course, they need no salary, never tire, and do not go on strikes. So to illustrate the complexity of how these things all happen, let me talk about voice translation. So this is what perhaps would happen in China, where I speak it English into a panel and it comes out in Chinese. So beginning with my input, I'm looking at the bottom left plot, beginning with input voice, say in English, which is then digitized by the phone and shipped over the wireless network to a massive AI servers, which may sometimes be hundreds of miles away. And these are these huge servers covering hundreds of thousands of square feet. There, the first DNNs, the deep neural networks, recognize the speech and extracts the English words that I was trying to say. The next, these fragments of English words are then cleaned up using the natural language DNNs to extract the intelligible sentence that I'm meant to say. This is then translated to Chinese text by another deep neural network, and the last deep neural network converts the Chinese text to digitized Chinese voice. If necessary, adopting intonation and vocalization as if I were to speak Chinese myself. And finally, the digitized voice is shipped back to the user or to the phone where flawless English Chinese emerges. And so all this gets done in the server farms. You can see that there. So you only see it happening on your phone or on this device I was showing you. Everything gets done in these massive computing facilities with lots of compute servers, AI servers, and so on and so forth. And on the top left shows the level of accuracy today. And you'll notice, for example, English to Chinese is more accurate than Chinese to English. So that's something we need to understand why. So next application is perception apps. This is an example of a perception application called Amazon Go, now spreading in the United States. These are unmanned stores where you walk in, swipe your ID, and then go about picking up items from the shelves and putting them in your bag or on the cart. The cameras and AI engines track your purchases as you walk around shopping. And finally, as you exit, your card is charged and a bill will be presented if you wish. You never deal with any humans. The key part of this technology is to flag shoplifters by observing facial and gait changes, which they can, I guess the machines can figure that out. And of course, the next is autonomy. The next layer is autonomy of vehicles and robots. Here is a Waymo automobile. It's an autonomous car. It's a company owned by Google that one sees around Stanford all the time. And it has many sensors, probably about, it's got LiDARs, it's got radars, it has cameras, infrared. And there's a huge push for autonomous cars which is touted, with the touted benefits of reducing accidents and freeing up parking spaces hogged by idle cars in cities. While full autonomy, known as level 5, is probably 10 to 15 years away, level 3 is already here, and level 4 is within reach soon. Autonomy will have a huge impact on society that you can only dimly comprehend today. So it's interesting to compare human and artificial intelligence hardware, AI hardware today. Machines need 100,000 times more volume and weight than human beings. A human brain, 3 pounds, and these are 300,000 pounds. And almost 1 million times more power. Human brain takes 20 watts, but these things take many megawatts. So clearly we have to learn a lot as to how our remarkable brains operate. On the other hand, machines have advantages too. They have virtually unlimited memory, never forget, can communicate instantaneously with thousands of other machines, and have access to vast amounts of data from the internet and sensors, and can use a variety of sensors that humans do not have. So machines have advantage of scale over the human rivals. To illustrate scale, this is a picture of computer vision. We humans see about 1 million faces in our lifetime, and probably we remember about 3,000 of them. On the other hand, machines already see 1 billion faces every day, mostly in China, and they remember every one of those billion. So quite a difference in scale. So now I'm going to start looking at the implications of AI, and we'll start with the textile industry. So although my focus is on AI, the other enabling technologies behind AI, computing, communications, and 5G are very much at play. Though throughout the history of the 3 industrial revolutions, predictions of doom for job losses turned out to be too pessimistic. For example, in textile industry, more and more tasks in weaving process were automated, and prompting workers to focus on things machines could not do, such as designing and building the machines, tending the machines to keep them running smoothly. This caused output to grow explosively. In America, in the 19th century, the amount of coarse cloth a single weaver could produce in an hour increased by a factor of 50 times. And the amount of labor required per yard reduced by 98%. This made cloth cheaper and increased demand for it, which in turn created more jobs for weaving and ancillary industries. And there, the number of jobs quadrupled from 1830 to 1900. In other words, technology gradually changed the nature of the weaver's job and skills required to do it, rather than eliminating jobs altogether. Some workers, of course, could not move up to the skills level and did suffer. The key issue to note is that lower skilled jobs that disappeared were replaced by even more higher skilled jobs. This story repeated in the telephone industry when manual exchanges were automated. Likewise, in automobile industry, the only jobs in the United States, the only jobs that disappeared for good were the jobs of horses that pull the carriages. Humans really benefited. In India, industrialization of textile industry in the UK devastated our handloom industry and largely deindustrialized our country. Without the technology and the educational base of Britain, we were not able to replace the lost jobs with higher skilled ones. On the other hand, the auto industry and related services segment like repair shops and drivers, post-independence have created tens of millions of new jobs with little or no collateral damage. Post-independence India has mostly relied on imported technologies and has mostly escaped the wrenching job displacements in the industrial world. So now we'll talk a little bit about job classification. So let us examine the vulnerable areas for job losses from IT. This is, I'm afraid, a US-centric view. We have to modify this for India. So one way to characterize this is to classify jobs on 2 axes. On the ranging from repetitive assembly jobs on the left, extreme left, to highly creative jobs on the extreme right. This is the horizontal axis. And physical dexterity axis plotted vertically from highly dexterous and physical on the top to sedentary jobs below at the bottom. So on this plot, we can sort of see where blue-collar jobs and white-collar jobs lie. So where are job losses going to come from? Given AI's capabilities, today is mostly in deep neural networks, we should expect job losses to begin at the bottom left with low-skilled white-collar jobs like online support, clerical workers, and it'll progress to hematologists, radiologists, moving to doctors and to lawyers. Blue-collar jobs like taxi drivers will also be threatened in the medium term. Physical and low-skill jobs, including food service, janitorial, gardening, will take time to replace, if ever. Jobs requiring physical dexterity and human interaction, like child and elderly care, are protected for a long, long time. As also highly creative jobs. The total job losses could be in this plot could be from 35 to 45%. It will happen probably over the next 25 years. So this is a plot of early warning of job loss in manufacturing. This is a phone assembly line in Dongguan, China. The company's name is Changying Precision Technology Factory for cell phones. Previously, they had 650 jobs. They're now down to 60 jobs. And they expect to move it down to 20 jobs next year. So it's a massive loss of jobs. The key question is what will replace the lost jobs and indeed create even more jobs. This has always happened in the past. So what about now? One segment for these new jobs will come from technology-related jobs to design, manufacture, maintain, and operate these new technologies. Another segment of new jobs will come from expanding and improving human interactions, jobs like child and elderly care, teaching, counseling, and so on and so forth. And of course, there will be more room for highly creative jobs in arts and sciences. One challenge for AI in the next decade will be to understand how to integrate various areas of AI, from reasoning to deep learning and robotics, into systems that serve mankind for the better and that are transparent in their design and applications. So we actually produced a very excellent AI report, Niti Aayog, under the leadership of CEO Amitabh Kant, who's here. They come out with a really superb report on AI in India, which addresses many important issues. So with these remarks, let me finally turn to India. By any measure, the role of information technology in our country has been mostly a huge win. It has a growing impact across many sectors, from e-governance to retail to financial services and to transportation. The role of the internet on GDP growth in India has been studied by various think tanks, and I've seen estimates something from 1% to 0.75%. And the use of internet apps on cell phones has been expanding rapidly in India. Social media has also been growing, and even applications of social media in rural regions have been growing. Social media has brought some real value, but also poses vulnerabilities to social cohesiveness. China decided to deal with this by building their own social media, which is not that difficult to do, Tencent, Baidu, WeChat, etc. In Europe, strict oversight laws have been put in place. So this is something India should also consider. In the services layer, India, which is the next layer, India has 1.1 billion phone connections, and internet penetration is around 560 million, with 30% in rural regions, thanks in fact to BharatNet. Our wireless services are among the cheapest in the world. Our data tariffs are 20 times cheaper than in the United States. I mean, if I pay at least 20 times the average bill that you pay here. So it's quite a rip-off. The cost of smartphones have also eroded to about 5,000 rupees for the low-end phones. So India is also rapidly building out data centers and other core infrastructure and is on track to meet the increasing internet use. The areas that need special attention, I think, in India are internet access to homes and small businesses, which still remains poor. And finally, at the foundational layer, there are many companies at play, but India depends almost entirely on imports. Perhaps around $100 billion of US dollars per year from suppliers in US, China, and East Asia. So I want to just put this, what I call as India headquartered companies. So the previous was about all companies. If you now look at India headquartered companies, we have a growing presence in the applications layer. There's Paytm, there's Ola, and so on and so forth. The only segment is social media where we have no Indian companies, or no big Indian companies. And of course, in the core technology, we have really no presence at all. And this brings multiple vulnerabilities, from national security to economic growth to job creation, but there's too big a subject to discuss today. We should, of course, not forget the hugely successful software and engineering services companies, from Infosys to CCS, Tech Mahindra, and Wipro. They have done India proud, but they're not the Huawei or the Qualcomm or the Cisco that India also needs. But I see new initiatives in AI, new initiatives in artificial intelligence coming from these companies, and so I do wish them well. Let me now take a quick tour of India's attempts to build core information technologies. And I will begin with a piece of history that at least some of you in the audience may not know. This is a story of Dr. William O'Shaughnessy. He came to India as a surgeon for the East India Company in 1823. He was popular as a lecturer at the Calcutta Medical College, and was known as a kind mentor to Indian students, medical students. O'Shaughnessy conducted research on a variety of topics. He was really a polyglot, including Indian medicinal plants. But he also invented the electric telegraph in 1839, just for a few months behind Samuel Morse in the United States. His technology was indeed ahead of Morse. His early attempts to build a telegraph network in Calcutta, where he was based, was thwarted by the management of the East India Company, for whatever reasons I don't understand. Luckily for him, Lord Dalhousie, then the Governor General of India, saw a demonstration of the telegraph and backed O'Shaughnessy strongly, and he went on to build 4,000-mile network, national network in India, connecting Calcutta, Delhi, Peshawar, Bombay, and Madras. He became the first Director General of Indian Telegraphs, and his network was, for a brief time, the largest network in the world. It is, the next one was the United States, but I think by 1860, US was bigger. And O'Shaughnessy also wrote the very first book in telecommunication in the world. I've written 2 books myself, but he wrote the first book, a handbook on telegraph engineering for the thousands of engineers that worked in the Indian Telegraph Network. In the 1857 mutiny, Sepoy Mutiny, or the First War of Independence, depending on which side you are, broke out. The telegraph gave East India Company a huge advantage. They crushed the revolt despite having only 1 British soldier for every 6 sepoys. And when the mutineering sepoys were executed in the thousands on the Raisana Hill, not far from here, they were heard to blame the accursed wire, meaning the telegraph, for their fate. 170 years later, the telegraph has become the internet, the smartphone, and now arriving AI technology. So a little bit about efforts of core technology in India. After India gained independence, India's vision for science and technology was defined by Prime Minister Nehru, and who saw the need for telephone networks. Notably, the very first PSU of the government was the Indian Telephone Industries, which he inaugurated in 1948. This picture shows Nehru visiting ITI, I think a few years later. The picture also underlines how much of telephone technology those days was mechanical. I was always surprised to find in the 80s the senior person ITI all being mechanical engineers when the world had become completely electronic, but I understand why. Nehru strongly backed visionary scientists like Homi Bhabha, Dr. Bhabha, who went on to create world-class research institutions like TIFR. In the 1950s, TIFR built an advanced computer system named TIFRAC under the leadership of Dr. Narasimhan, who I knew. And the picture shows Nehru inaugurating TIFRAC in 1960 with Bhabha in the foreground. And TIFRAC was that time contemporary with anything that we saw anywhere else in the world. In 1966, Bhabha chaired the Committee on Electronics and laid out a roadmap for Indian electronic industry, what we now call as information technology industry. And Bhabha tragically died earlier the same year. His report led to the formation of the Department of Electronics and the Electronics Commission in 1970 and 1971. Professor M.G.K. Menon, brilliant protege of Bhabha, became the first secretary of the Department of Electronics and also chairman of the Electronics Commission. Menon had a strong impact on Indian electronics policy, and we still live under that shadow even today. It was another decade before India took a new initiative in electronics, this time to build telephone switches. And we turned to a dynamic NRI, Mr. Sam Pitroda, who set up CDOT. Pitroda largely delivered on his promises, and CDOT telephone switches entered the Indian network a few years later, but could not keep up with galloping advances in telecom. Pitroda went on to build a CDOT clone called CDAC, and at his request, I was briefly involved with CDAC in 1988, I think. Unfortunately, CDAC has not been able to dent our reliance on imports for computing technology. So India's approach to core information technology for the first 4 decades was on self-reliance, but restricting foreign imports. In the 1990s, galloping advances in computing, internet, and wireless in the West had completely overtaken local industry. And India opened its doors, I think rightly, to imported technology. Each of these early initiatives, created by India's best minds, and with the best of purposes and intentions, but over the years, the world has moved on, and India's internal technology capability, measured in terms of global market share, is now negligible. So now a final word about core information technology and R&D ecosystem. Core information technology needs highly skilled engineering manpower. For example, in semiconductor industry, 95% of manpower is R&D focused and operate at skill levels of PhDs and MS. Core information technology also needs large R&D investments. For example, in wireless semiconductor industry, where I used to work, it would take about $2 to $5 billion to build a wireless chip to target LTE wireless chip to target, say, Apple or Samsung high-end phone. It's an incredible amount of money. And I think Intel is doing it and probably still losing money on it. Another aspect of core information technology is the globalized ecosystem. A smartphone may have components from over 15 countries and over 100 suppliers. This also means there is no such thing as being self-reliant. In core IT, interdependence is how the world, how the globe is the global model, and how we should work. So what are the enabling factors that create high technology companies? It's a combination of many things coming together, and entrepreneurial mindset, risk funding, research ecosystem that attracts and trains our best talent, and finally, intelligent policy support from the government. The challenges faced by India to create a core information technology ecosystem are huge. We need certainly good entrepreneurs in a world where only the fittest survive, and one is constantly challenged by scrappier newcomers. So it is really the law of the jungle. We also need vast venture funding. The norm in Silicon Valley is that one needs on average of $1.25 of investment to take a company on average to $1 of sustained revenue. By this measure, India will need $125 billion of US dollars of risk funding to take us to import-export parity if you want to do that. But we have other tools, and I believe we can do this at much lower costs, but that will still take some tens of billions of dollars. And particularly in a sector where 75% of investments will fail. And now to conclude, the history of post-independence India has offered much ground for optimism. Remained a vibrant democracy with nearly 700 million casting their votes in the last general elections some years ago. The whole world stood up and cheered. Born in a trauma of communal violence, we have managed largely to contain it. Despite the simplistic pleasures, we have retained our secular character, and we have managed to overcome narrow social prejudices and brought vast numbers of depressed castes into the national mainstream. We have built a federal structure with comfortable balance of power and a tolerance for cultural plurality. These are big achievements. On the minus side, we have still to deliver a decent standard of living for many of our citizens. And coming to the point today, we have yet to join the club of advanced technology countries with strong innovation and an intellectual property base. We are now faced with two tsunamis in information technology, 5G and AI. that are washing up on our shores, and they bring many opportunities for economic growth, but also the undercurrents that create new vulnerabilities. But I believe we now have policy-level leadership, many of them sitting in this room here, who are determined to grasp these new opportunities and make India a key player in global information technology. So I'm very optimistic. And finally, let me thank you again for your patience and presence here today, and present to you with a picture of a beautiful girl covered in coal dust. This picture appeared in New York Times photo essay and quickly spread across the internet. She lives, I believe, in the Bokaro coal fields and scratches a living by gathering coal scraps that fall off trucks. She's about the age of my granddaughter, Anjali, and perhaps many of you will have daughters or granddaughters of her age. And so let me conclude with a challenge. And the challenge is making information technology work for all our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Paulraj, for that extremely illuminating address, which really spells out the kind of challenge that a country like India faces. We have time for about 3 to 4 questions. So, if would you be able to read out?
The first question is, how will the environmental hazards related to 5G be tackled? And this question is from Jatin. The next question is, in view of the very large population and coming AI intrusion into all spheres, should India not concentrate in a big way in the following areas where AI impact will be minimal? Healthcare, travel, construction, or shall we say reconstruction towards a smart city? India, and there's no name for this. So
one more, maybe.
Kindly provide comparative analysis of US-China tech race in AI, ML, 5G. In this context, how can India leverage its non-aligned status to its benefit in the near future? And this question is by Sarang Tarane.
Would you like to? Yeah, I think.
So what was the first question?
Okay.
The first question was about
how will the environmental hazards related to 5G be tackled?
5G environmental hazards.
Does it work?
Yeah.
Okay, good. No, so I think what the question refers to is the issue of RF safety. Already there are, of course, lots of networks in India for 3G and 4G, which radiate RF energy. And there are norms of safety of this radiation, which I think, which is mandated by FCC and largely, I think, followed by India. There have been, I find in India, I'm talking about on 5G, but 4G, sometimes I sometimes open a hotel window and find there's a antenna pointing at me, and probably that is not good code. So there's some enforcement of that code is important. But 5G, there's been some let me call it noise about it. Technically, the only, I think, first of all, 5G will operate in the lower bands, 3.5, 2.5. We already operate below the 3 gigahertz band. It'll go to 3.5. It'll also go to the millimetric wave band. but it's non-ionizing radiation, and all the, obviously this is a big area for study in the United States. So far, there's no evidence that there's any additional danger. So we must take the normal precautions, but 5G is no more problematic than 4G. Having said that, the human beings have only used wireless technology in India for the last 15 years or 10 years. So we haven't gone through it for entire lifetimes. So there's always a question saying, is it safe? Well, that's not, nobody can answer that question. But there's no evidence today. In the United States and in the West, they've been using cell phones for 30 years now. There's no evidence of any form to say there is a danger. So that's the first question. The second question was about AI. And the question was, can we stop AI or?
No, it says that in view of the very large population in India, I presume, and the coming AI intrusion into all spheres, should India not concentrate in a big way in the following areas where AI impact will be minimal, which I don't think is true: healthcare, travel, leisure, tourism, and construction. And all this relating to, say, the concept of smart city in India.
I think Mr. Amitabh Khan should answer this question. So he's a better expert than me. But I would say that, if a technology succeeds in the West, it's going to come to India. I don't think it's possible for us to stop anything. That's unfortunately been the history of India and no country in the world, because they bring so much productivity gains that it will come. So unfortunately, I think any regulation of that type is very unlikely. So I think my suggestion for India is that AI will come and it will, I think, destroy jobs, but we can create more jobs if we are savvy about it. For example, if we get more into technology, we can create jobs from technology, in AI technology. So we got to replace these the lost jobs by higher skilled jobs. But trying to prevent AI from entering areas, for example, already, for example, without your knowledge, is being used in your visa approvals or loan approvals or visa fraud detection. So I doubt it can be changed or can be stopped. But I would also defer to Mr. Amitabh Khan to say a few words.
Well, my view is that artificial intelligence is inevitable, and the earlier we adapt to machine learning and artificial intelligence, the better it will be. And the sectors like health and travel will be the first to face, because they are sectors where you're going to see a huge amount of data. And, on the job issue, my view is that while some jobs will die out, we'll end up creating substantially large number of jobs which will be much better paid jobs, and there'll be quality jobs. And in India, the challenge is really about the quality of jobs and the wages of jobs rather than just mere jobs. And therefore, we need to get into these areas in a very, very determined manner so as to use full advantage of the new wave of technology which the world will be confronted with.
The other question was really your evaluation of where the US and China stand with respect to some of these new technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning. And, how can India leverage, the development in these countries for its own advancement? Are there ways in which we can work together with these countries?
If I speak frankly, I'll be banned from China and the United States. So, yeah. So, but I think there is. Anybody reading papers will see that U.S. is reacting to China in a very strong way. Unprecedented way. I was telling Mr. Shyam Saran that Stanford University, for example, government has never interfered with Stanford in our research relationships, but now that is happening. So. The real reasons I do not understand, but the popular sentiment is that in 5G, China has probably moved ahead of the United States. In fact, US has no infrastructure companies in wireless today. The last company, Lucent, was absorbed by Alcatel. that got absorbed by Nokia. So US has no presence in the wireless infrastructure. But nevertheless, I think there's I think US and I think like all of us should understand that 5G is much more pervasive and brings in a whole lot of positives and a whole lot of vulnerabilities, with 100,000 things touching the internet, security becomes a nightmare. And therefore, US is worried about that, and so I think that's part of the reaction. On AI, all the pioneers of, in fact, you look at today's pictures, all the pioneers are sitting in the United States. But China is, in applications, seem to be pulling ahead. I go to China often. You see much more popular applications of AI there than in the United States. So I can't really judge the deeper issues there. But what I would say is that there is the new Cold War is on the two twin technology of 5G and AI. And I think the United States is reacting pretty strongly here. I have no additional comments on this matter. But how can we benefit? Well, I think ultimately India has to build its own technology. And I think China, in some sense, built its technology by leveraging US resources. Many US professors, including myself, have been involved with China for years and years and years. So we should attract many outsiders to India to help us build our technology. That's something we can learn from them. China also sent out a lot of, by now, since Deng Xiaoping's time, 150,000 scholars. And I can open my email now, my internet now. I'll find there's a request from China saying, can I come and work in your group? I'm now retired. I don't take researchers. But I have hosted many Chinese researchers in my group at Stanford, not one from India. I have brought Indian researchers, but I had to pay for them myself. So I think we need more coupling between India and outside countries. So I think, and there are other things that I think I've been talking to Secretary Sundararajan and Secretary Amitabh Kant. So we have lots of ammunition that we can do. And I'm quite sure that if we play our cards well, we too can join China and the United States. In fact, I'll be the happiest person if the US starts targeting India, because we have begun to rise and they feel challenged.
Thank you. And last question is, I think you had hinted at this. Why is it that major Indian companies like TCS or Wipro and others, other private players, why haven't they been able to create our own Facebook, YouTube, or Google?
Right. So that's a sensitive question. I think they've been enormously successful, and I think the success has hurt us because it was never easy, but they've built very successful companies in service industry. So it's very difficult to get out of that groove. They're trying. I see some attempts by these companies to build AI and so on and so forth. So it's very difficult to change the business model. For example, tomorrow, if let's assume, I'm not saying for sure, but let's assume Infosys is working for Facebook. Tomorrow it tries to build its own social media. They're competing against their client, so that can't be done. So I think these companies are in some sense tied into their business model, so they may be difficult for them to move out of it. So that's probably part of the reasons.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry we have completely run out of time. I will now request Director of India International Center, Mr. Srivastav, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Friends, it is my proud privilege to propose a vote of thanks on the occasion of conclusion of the valedictory session of this fantastic program called Metamorphoses series. First of all, I would like to begin by thanking our special guest, Professor Arogyaswami Paulraj, for giving to us a glimpse of the way forward in the advancement of digital technologies. Your insightful presentation had key takeaways which we hope to take forward in our future programs. It was a very heartening moment when we were hearing you, sir, when we were trying to allay the fear of AI in terms of job losses. We are indeed very grateful to you for taking your time out and being with us on this occasion today. I would also like to thank our collaborators, Niti, Aayog, and Center for Policy Research for their generous support. Mr. Amitabh Kant and Mrs. Yamini Iyer, thank you for taking time out and sharing your thoughts today. On behalf of President of IISc, Shri N. Vohra, I would like to say that it was a pleasure working with your organizations. A big thank to the young team of CPR and Niti Aayog, as also our own program division, for putting this together. I will be failing in my duty if I do not thank Ambassador Shyam Saran, our life trustee, who has been the moving spirit behind this whole program. Sir, your enthusiasm has ultimately culminated in organizing this fantastic program, which has benefited everyone. Finally, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to all of you for coming and joining us in this endeavor. Thank you very much.